Won't be covering we won't be covering every step from pre-award to closeout, and we won't be diving into all of the administrative or post-award requirements. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows what we're actually going to be covering today. Instead, today's focus is very specific. We're going to look at practical, actionable tips for successful grant writing, grounded in the expectations of the uniform guidance. I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with the 2 CFR 200. These are the strategies that strengthen proposals, improve clarity, and help ensure that our writing is both compelling and compliant. Okay. So our purpose today is really straightforward. I want to give you practical, actionable guidance. We're grounding everything in the uniform guidance, like I mentioned earlier. Even if you're not writing federal grants every day, these principles shape what funders expect. Clarity, consistency, strong internal controls, and alignment between your narrative and your budget. Ultimately, my goal is to help support you in developing proposals that are clear, competitive, and compliant. And towards the bottom there, you'll notice it says DEI informed approaches strengthen community impact and funder confidence. That's something that we won't be covering right now. That will be in the reporting part of it, as this is mainly for tribal programs, and tribal programs are typically not included in that part of it. All right. So understanding the funding landscape. When you begin writing a grant, the first step is in understanding the funding landscape. Federal grants, pass-through entities, and private foundational grants all have different requirements. Always start by reviewing the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or the NOFO. Um, the NOFO is essentially the roadmap. It tells you what the funder cares about, what they're legally allowed to fund, and what they expect you to deliver. When you start with the NOFO, you're not guessing. You're aligning your project with the funder's priorities from the very beginning. So that part of it is very, very important to read that NOFO and actually take it apart. I'm sure a lot of you in here already are very familiar with the review of the NOFO. And usually in the beginning, when you first start reviewing the NOFO, I always suggest that you create a team to review that and pick it apart, pick it apart. That way we're able to align it with the CFR 200. By understanding the funding landscape early, you save the time and avoid compliance issues and increase your chances of submitting a proposal that's competitive, especially whenever you need it complete and responsive to what the funder is actually asking for. So starting with your with a strong needs statement, it needs to be data driven and clearly demonstrate why your project matters. I always say to use your local data. I'm pretty sure a lot of you know that. Um, the community input and evidence to show what the need is. Under the CFR 200, awards emphasize performance measurement. So your need statement should connect directly to the measurable outcomes. Funders want to understand why your project matters. Not just that it sounds like a good idea. When you use your local data, community voice, and real evidence, you're showing that the need is real, relevant, and grounded in lived experiences of the people you serve. And my apologies, my PowerPoints tend to look a little boring. I don't have a lot of animation or anything like that. So just most of it's going to be pretty boring. A strong needs statement builds trust. Reviewers can see that you've done your homework and that you understand your community and that your project is responding to a document need, not assumptions. That credibility goes a long way in competitive funding environments. So when you're um, starting your needs statement, you really want to make sure that you take a deep dive into the community that you're serving. Look around, and I'll have some resources after this for some data resources, especially for tribal communities. But that's where you want to start first is your research and your assessments of your community. Aligning your proposal with uniform guidance. This is very important. Aligning your proposal with the uniform guidance is important because it shows funders that you understand the federal rules that govern how money can be spent. Even if you're not writing a federal grant, like I said earlier, these principles influence almost every major funder, federal, state, tribal, even many private foundations. When you build your proposal around the core cost principles, the allowable, reasonable, and consistently applied, you're demonstrating that the project is financially sound. Reviewers want to see that your budget makes sense. Your costs are justified and that you have the internal controls to manage the award responsibly. Ensuring that proposed activities are allowable. Whenever you look into the CFR 200, you'll find that whenever you're aligning there, it builds credibility when reviewers see that your activities, budget, internal controls reflect the guidance principles. It signals that your organization is prepared, capable, and ready to manage public funds responsibly. That confidence can make a real difference in competitive review process. So building a clear, logical project narrative. Reviewers often read dozens, sometimes hundreds of proposals, so you want to make sure that yours really stands out. Clear, logical project narrative is important because of the story reviewers use to understand your entire proposal. If it's confusing or disjointed, even a strong project can come across as unfocused or unrealistic. A strong narrative also builds trust. It shows that your organization has a thoughtful plan, that you've considered the details, and you're prepared to carry out the work. Funders want to invest in projects that feel grounded and achievable. A lot of times that's a little difficult whenever you're working in, when you're trying to propose a proposal for Native communities because there's not a lot of data that comes across our waves. So it's really, really important to do your homework and get into those community needs assessments. Your SMART objectives, your activities, and your budget into one cohesive story is something that's going to build your project narrative. When everything connects logically, reviewers can see the full picture and the significant increase in your competitiveness. And this is something that I'm pretty sure that a lot of you are familiar with, developing SMART objectives. Again, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Um, objectives, they help the funders see exactly what you plan to accomplish. They must be, again, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Funders want to see exactly what you plan. When your objectives are specific and measurable, the reviewers can immediately understand what success looks like. It removes the ambiguity and shows that you've thought through all of your details. The time-bound piece is critical. It shows that you have a plan for when things will happen, which helps reviewers see that your project is manageable and well structured. SMART objectives also tie directly into performance measurements under the 2 CFR 200 dash 301. If your objectives are clear and measurable from the start, it becomes much easier to track progress, report outcomes, and stay compliant once the grant is awarded. So ultimately, the SMART objectives builds confidence. They tell the funder, we know what we're doing, we know how we will measure it, and we're prepared to deliver results. That clarity makes your proposal that much more competitive. Creating a strong work plan. I've been looking for a few different templates for the work plans. I know that a lot of federal grants already have their templates come down. I'm pretty sure you guys, most of you are aware of that. But there are some templates that we can find online. I'm pretty sure we can probably email those out if anybody wants those. You can put them in the chat if you want a template to go off of. A strong work plan, it consists of who will do what, by when, and how successful it will be measured. Funders want to see that you have the capacity and structure to carry out the project. Your work plan must align with the objectives, budget, and staffing plan. A strong work plan reduces risk for you and for the funder. It helps prevent scope creep. So those of you in project management, we all know what a scope creep is. Missed deadlines and confusion during implementation. It becomes the roadmap you'll use to manage the project once the grant is awarded. So a strong work plan you'll have to have a clear, organized plan to actually carry it out. Reviewers want to see the structure, the accountability, and the realistic timeline. So your compliant budget. Your budget must follow the cost principles in 2 CFR 200, 403-405 or through 405. Every cost must be necessary, reasonable, and allocable to the project. Make sure your budget narrative clearly ties each cost to a specific activity in your work plan. This is where many proposals fail, but it's also where you can stand out. Build a compliant budget. Building a compliant budget is important because it shows funders that you understand how to manage their money responsibly. The budget is one of the first places reviewers look for red flags. It's also one of the most common reasons proposals get rejected. When your budget follows the cost principles that are necessary, reasonable, and allocable, you're demonstrating that every dollar has a purpose and directly supports the project. Funders want to see that you're not over budgeting, under budgeting, or including costs that don't clearly tie back to the work. A compliant budget reduces the risk for both you and the funder. It helps prevent audit findings, disallowed costs, and implementation challenges later on. When your budget is aligned with your objectives, your staffing, and your work plan, it sends a powerful message. We are prepared, we are organized, and we can manage this award with integrity. So justifying every cost. Cost justification is essential for equipment. Reference the CFR 200, 439. For travel, reference 200, 474. Use quotes. That's very, very important when you're justifying every cost. So using quotes, historical data, market research to show that your costs are reasonable. Funders want transparency and documentation, and this step actually builds trust whenever you do a deep dive into the cost principles for 200 or Uniform Guidance 200, 474. Justifying every cost is important because it shows the funder that your budget is grounded in reality, not guesswork. Reviewers want to see that you've done your homework and that every dollar you're requesting has a clear, defensible basis. This step also protects you during implementation. If a cost is ever questioned during monitoring or audit, you already have the justification in place. So cost justification isn't just about getting funded, it's about staying compliant and avoiding problems down the road. When you reference the uniform guidance like the 200 439 for equipment or the 200 474, you're demonstrating that you're understanding the federal rules behind your budget decisions. That alone builds credibility. Incorporating strong internal controls. So the internal controls are required under 200 303. In your proposal, describe how your organization ensures financial oversight, segregation of duties, and compliance monitoring. This reassures the funders that you can manage federal dollars responsibly. Under the 2 CFR 200 303 internal controls, it's not optional, they're required. Funders want to know that you have safeguards in place to prevent errors, detect issues early, and ensure that every cost is allowable and properly documented. I have a little note there that says when you talk about things like segregation of duties, financial oversight, and compliance monitoring, you're demonstrating that your organization takes stewardship seriously. This builds trust, especially for federal awards where the risk of misuse or audit findings is a major concern. So during your the section in your narrative where you're incorporating strong internal controls, that's where you want to cite things like segregation duties, financial oversight, compliance monitoring. That way they know that you're serious. The strong internal controls, it actually makes your life easier once the grant is awarded. They help keep your project on track, reduce the chance of disallowed costs, support clean audits. So including them in your proposal isn't just about compliance. So planning for procurement compliance. Procurement is a major compliance area. Sections 200, 317 to 327 outline competitive procurement requirements. In your proposal, briefly describe your procurement policy. Conflict of interest, safeguards, and documentation practices. This shows readiness and reduces risk. So again, whenever you're doing your proposal, you want to make sure that you clearly outline your organization's procurement policy, the conflict of interest safeguards that you have in place, and the documentation practices. Um, Sections 200, 317 to 327 lay out very clear expectations for competition, documentation, and conflict of interest safeguards. When you show in your proposal that your organization follows these rules, you're signaling to the funder that you understand the requirements and have systems in place to manage them. This also reduces risk for your organization. When procurement is handled correctly from the start, you avoid audit issues later on. So include procurement readiness in your proposal. Um, it's not just a compliance box, it's a way to build trust and demonstrate that your organization is capable, organized, and ready to implement the project right away. So demonstrating organizational capacity. Funders want to know you can deliver. Highlight staff qualifications, past performance, and partnerships. If you have successful grant outcomes or strong community relationships, this is the place to showcase them. Demonstrating organizational capacity is important because funders aren't just evaluating your project. They're evaluating your ability to deliver on what you're promising. Even the strong project design won't get funded if the reviewers aren't confident in your organization. When you highlight staff qualifications, past performance, and strong partnerships, you're showing that you have the right people, the right experience, and the right relationships in place. Funders want to know you've done this before or that you have the expertise and the support needed to succeed. Ultimately, the demonstrating capacity reassures funders that you're not starting from scratch. You're building a foundation. They're building on a foundation of experience, infrastructure, community trust. That confidence can make a significant difference in the competitive review process. So building a strong evaluation plan. Evaluation is tied directly to 200-301. Identify your performance indicators, data collection methods, and reporting process. A strong evaluation plan shows that you're committed to accountability and continuous improvement. I put another note in there that under the 2 CFR 200 dot 301 performance measures, it's not optional in a lot of federal proposals. Federal awards require you to track the outcomes, not just outputs. When you identify your indicators, your data collection methods, and your reporting process upfront, you're demonstrating that you understand those requirements and are prepared to meet them. A solid evaluation plan also builds credibility. It tells the funders that you're committed to accountability, transparency, and continuous improvement, all qualities that make your proposal more competitive. When you know exactly that you're measuring what you're measuring and how you'll measure it, you're better equipped to stay on track, adjust when needed, and report meaningful results. That makes implementation smoother and strengthens your relationship with the funder. Addressing sustainability. Funders want to know what happens after the grant ends. Describe how you'll sustain the work, whether through partnerships, future funding, or organizational capacity. Sustainable strength, your sustainability strengthens your proposal and demonstrates long-term commitment. When you describe how the work will continue after the grant ends, you're showing that your organization has thought strategically about the future, whether it's through partnerships, diversifying funding, or building internal capacity. Sustainability signals that your project won't disappear once the money runs out. So, sustainability strengthens your proposal overall. It ties together your capacity, your partnerships, and your long-term vision when funders see that you're planning for durability, not dependability. Your proposal becomes much more competitive with the ensure clear, consistent, error-free writing. I have a note in there that says reviewers are looking for signals of competence. When your narrative, budget, and attachments are all tell the same story with the same numbers, the same terminology, and the same logic, it shows that your team is organized. So clarity matters. Review your proposal for consistency across the narrative, budget, and attachments. Follow formatting requirements exactly. A clean professional proposal signals competence and attention to detail. So why is this part important? Reviewers are looking for signals of competence. That's the main reason why this part is very, very important. Formatting in this section, formatting really matters. Page limits, font size, file naming, required sections shows respect for the process and makes your proposal easier to evaluate. Reviewers notice when applicants don't follow directions and it can hurt your score. Clean writing reduces risk, errors, inconsistencies, or unclear expectations. They can arise questions about your capacity to manage the award. A polished proposal tells the funder, we're careful, we're thorough, and we can be trusted with the investment. So I included a proposal proofreading checklist. This is just a lot of requirements for federal grants. If you want to go ahead and screenshot this or save this, you can come up with your own checklist. A lot of NOFOs actually come with a checklist, so you'll be able to download those. I do have some resources that I'll be sharing here shortly. So we'll go over a little bit of this. Narrative clarity, that's part of a checklist. You can turn this part into your own template if you'd like. The consistency across documents. Confirm numbers match across the narrative, budget, and attachments. Use the same terminology throughout participants, clients, youth, etc. Ensuring staffing, timelines, and activities align with your work plan. Double check that objectives and outcomes match your SMART statements. Formatting and compliance. Follow all the NOFO formatting rules. Again, page limits, margins, spacings, font size. Ensure attachments are included. Remove tack changes, comments, and placeholder texts. Budget accuracy, verify calculations and totals. Ensure each cost is justified and tied to a specific activity. Confirm costs follow uniform guidance principles, allowable, allocable, reasonable. Check the indirect cost rates are correct and documented. Data and evidence. Confirm all data sources are accurate and up to date. Ensure citations are references or references are included where required. Check the data in the need statement supports check check that data in the need statement supports your objectives. Internal consistency. Make sure the narrative, work plan, evaluation plan, and budget tell the same story. Confirm your roles and responsibility are consistent across sections. And then grammar and readability, run a spelling and grammar check. Read aloud to catch awkward phrases or unclear sentences. Use tools like Grammarly or Hemingway for clarity. Ensure tone is professional and confident and concise. The final review, have at least one colleague review the full proposal. As reviewers, ask reviewers to check for clarity, logic, and missing information. So I've listed some helpful grant writing resources. Again, there's Grammarly, Hemingway, Microsoft Editor, organization and collaboration, Google SharePoint, Google Drive, Notion or OneNote. Trello and Asana, I'm pretty sure some of you may be familiar with this. It tracks deadlines and proposal workflows. Monday.com is a good one too. I haven't used Monday.com for proposal workflows though, so Trello and Asana is actually something that's very, very good with this. Helpful grant writing resources, budgeting and compliance, Excel templates, budget calculators, cost trackers, and match documentation. OMB uniform guidance, federal rules for allowability, procurement, and internal controls, federal NOFO templates, structure and required components for federal proposals. Helpful grant, or in addition to the helpful grant writing resources, research and data sources, U.S. Census Bureau, demographic and community data, Bureau of Labor Statistics, employment and economic data, local, tribe, or community data resources, culturally relevant, place-based data. So sometimes it's a little difficult to retrieve data from a lot of these sources when it comes to Native communities. So I've included just a little bit of some resources that I've worked with in the past. So some data, tribal data sources. None of the states like South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, or Nebraska currently have explicit standalone tribal data sovereignty laws like Washington State does, but each state interacts with tribal data through public health, government to government relationships, and most importantly, tribal sovereignty. So tribal sovereignty itself creates those protections. It's not in the form of the specific statute for a state. So my tribal area, the U.S. Census Bureau, tribal level population, housing, education, and economic data. That's one source that I have used before. The CDC, tribal public health data, health statistics, tribal epidemiology centers, public health tools. That's a really, really good source there too. I've never used the Congressional Research Service, but I did see it in several proposals that I was on a team for writing with. So I know that it is a legitimate source. Native Biodata Consortium. I believe this is fairly new and it is located in South Dakota. Indigenous controlled research, data sovereignty, and health data. A lot of these resources, you might want to double check to see how many tribal epidemiology centers. I don't believe there's many. I know I just came from an organization that had one, so I'm not sure how many there are nationally. Laws protecting tribal data sovereignty. Again, we went over that before with the state protections. The others, the South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Nebraska, they don't have the standalone laws like Washington and California do. Tribal protections, tribal sovereignty, inherent authority over their data. Their data sovereignty matters. So when conducting your research, make sure you're reaching out to the proper chains through that specific community. Federal protections, HIPAA, federal recognition of tribal sovereignty, and then the CFR 164-501 supports tribal access to health data. So sources and references that I've cited in this webinar was primarily the federal guidance, uniform administrative requirements, cost principles, and audit requirements for federal awards. Some of the key sections that I cited were the cost principles, internal controls, performance measurements, procurement standards, equipment, and travel reporting requirements, subaward monitoring. I didn't include a lot of the laws that we just mentioned, but that I just mentioned, but I think it's safe to say that only Washington and California have those state laws. All right, that's all I have right now. So thank you. If you guys have any questions, I'm gonna turn this over to Tiara.
Thank you, Malai. Yeah, if anybody has questions, just put them in the Q&A and we'll get those answered. So someone did say, Jewel Bork, can we get a copy of the presentation slides? A lot of data to remember or write down. Yeah, so this, oh wait, I should actually stop recording.